Okay, in this video, we are going to look at how to stop getting the random questions that you're generating repeating. Okay, so if I run the program at the minute, what you'll be able to see is press start. And if I press, right, so question one's come up with this question. This is the fifth question out of my list of questions. If I press next, I'm getting a different question. Press next again. Okay, so I'm getting random questions this time. But then on the fifth question, I got the same question as the first question. So I don't want that to happen. And I've just pressed again. Number 6 is the same as the previous question. So this is what happens. Now, it's less likely to happen if you've got more questions, of course. And I've only got 5. But what I wanted also to do is to stop that I can't do any more questions when I get to the end of the question. So you can say I'm on question 11, but I've only got 5 questions, so I shouldn't be able to do that. Right, so that's what we're going to start off with. Now, the first thing we'll do is we're going to go up to global variables here, just call it variables instead. And this one, I'm just going to write that is an integer. And then the next one, I'm going to say used questions. And this is going to be a list. Okay, so in Python we call it a list, but it is a 1D array, and we'll just put in brackets a list. Okay, so this is an empty list at the minute. There's no spaces in there, you can see, so it's just the two quotes. And we're gonna, this is a global variable, so it's accessible from anywhere in our program. But if we want to change it in our program, what we need to do is write global and then put the name of it here. So I'm going to just copy this up here, go down to global in my display question, comma, and paste it in there. Right, so now this comment that says about what this does is not right anymore. This isn't exactly right. So what I'm doing is I'm importing imports variables, okay, and the increments bit, I'm just going to do Control X. This one line here, increments, so I'll just paste that there, put a comment hashtag before that, take away the and increments. And we're probably going to move this in a little bit. We might move it to a different position, but at the minute we'll just keep it there. Okay, so what do we need to do? Well, we've got this random question. Now what we're going to do is also find out where our current question is. So I'm just going to move this comment actually and just put it over here, so I'm not writing as many lines of code every time, because otherwise you end up with this display question becoming really big. So here we go, current questions. There's going to be a new variable here, and we're going to make this using data. So what we want to do, the current question, if I think about it here, I've got my questions here. Current question is this number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, these numbers here. And the index of each one of these specific numbers is 0. So if I go to this bit, copy it, just put it here for the moment, and what you'll be able to notice is that here it says a 2, right? So here I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just want to change that to 0 because it's the first in this index of that. Okay, so that's that done fine. But what else we want to think about is what data type this is, because this might be important. If we're going to compare, we're going to need to compare the current question to used questions, which is currently empty, but it won't be empty, it'll be full, okay, eventually. So what we want to do is maybe change this to string, because used questions is going to be a list probably of strings. So to change this to a string, we can do str, this is a built-in function, open a bracket, and we want to change all of that into a string and close it. So this current question is just going to be equal to a number, and it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in my case. In your case, it could be 1 to 20. Okay, so at the end, we're just going to then put a comment, and the comment just says current question number, as string. Right? And you can see why it's important actually now that we're starting to do this. We're putting comments saying what data type this is exactly, because here we got generate random question number, and what is this? Question number, and it's an integer, isn't it? So I'm going to just put as int on the end of that. Just make this a little bit longer. Okay, so it's really important that you do define what these data types are, because looking at this, it's really hard to tell. You can't really tell that easily. Here you can sort of see it because it says str here, but it's hard to know what these things are. Okay, so next we're going to create a loop. Now this loop we have not used at all yet, because we've got two kinds of loops that we can do, which is another word for iteration, right? Something that repeats. So up in read file, we did a little simple iteration here, and this is a for loop, so it's for every line in the file. So this file that contained all of these questions, we put them all into data. That's what we're doing here. So we do it one by one, and it does that 5 times essentially, because I've got 5 questions. So that's what this loop is doing. Now we're going to do a different loop down here, and this is a conditional loop. So that was a count controlled loop. So the count in this case is 5 times because I got 5 things in my file. This time it's going to be a conditional loop. So the condition is going to check whether the current question has already been used or not. That's the main thing we want to do. And we also want to check that the length of used questions is less than the length of data which is in our file. So it's quite complicated when you think about it, but we'll start off and hopefully you'll understand this. Right, so what I'm going to do is just copy the names of these. So I've got current questions, so paste that, while current question in, and I'm going to say used questions, and I'm using this and operator. Right, so you've got and, you've got or are the ones that you can use, and then and I'm going to say the length. So the length we used up here, len, L-E-N, so I'm going to do length of used questions. So I'm going to say len, open brackets, close brackets on the end. Right, so I'm doing 2 conditions in this while loop. So while the current question is in used questions, so used questions is eventually going to equal 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, right? So imagine, for example, question number 5 has been used. We want in used questions to have the number 5 in it, and if the current question is number 5, then we want it just to change and do another random number. That's what we want to do. So we're going to do these 2 lines of code and repeat them until it's not true. So here I'm going to do a less than. So and length of used questions is less than length or len of data. So I've got my data here, so data, close the bracket. All right, and then at the end you do 2 dots. So this is very similar, like here you've got your for loop there, 2 dots, where you've got if, 2 dots on the end, elif, 2 dots on the end. Everything that's after those 2 dots, always indented, look at that. Up here, the for loop, 2 dots, it's indented, next line. Even when I create a procedure, right, this procedure, display questions, 2 dots, everything is indented. So after here, these 2 dots, when I press enter, it's automatically indented in one. And what I want to put in here is these 2 things again. So I want it to loop round and constantly loop and change the random number, generate another random number. So what I need to do is copy these 2 and I'll copy it from the right. It's good to do from the right all the way, pull up, right, to the left here. Copy that, and then down here, I'm just going to do it over here, do the 2 lines there, paste it, and then you can see I can go to here and press tab key in one, tab key in another time for the second line. So they're both indented in, and that is going to be my loop. Okay, so this is going to keep on looping around. Right, the next thing I also want to do is also do something with this Q count. So we want it to eventually stop or end. Okay, so what we'll do here is we will do an if statement. So we're going to say if Q count is less than len data, so the length of data, right? So the length of data is 5 in my situation. Then if that's true, I want it to do all of this code, right? So I'm going to select all of that and press tab to indent it in one. Okay, so that's that done. Now, the other thing I want to do is just look at printing some of this stuff out, and also used questions is empty at the minute because there it is, it's empty, right? That's up here. So we need to actually add stuff every time. So after you've displayed one question, we want to add that question or the current question into that. Okay, so we're going to do two things here. We're going to increment the Q count. So we've got Q count here. I'm going to take that Q count, do Control X, paste it down here, and then I can just get rid of those extra lines. Okay, so this is looking not too big. It's reasonably sized at the minute, this procedure. If it ends up getting too big, as I say, then that becomes a problem. A bit like GUI is massive. We shouldn't really have it that big. Now, what I want to do for the moment is just print Q count just to test it, just to make sure this is happening properly, working whenever we do test the program. But we'll remove that print later. And then we need to add the current question into used questions every time we've used a question. So the way to do that, you take any instance of where you've written used questions, paste that there, and we have to add it. Now I said add, but what I actually mean is append dot, and this is a method, right? So when you use a dot and then this is a method, okay? And it is append. So think of it like if you had like the lunch queue, you know, when you go to have your lunch and you go to the end of the list, you're adding yourself onto the end of the queue to go and have lunch. But if you say add in Python, add is addition, which is basic arithmetic. So we're actually wanting to append, which is putting it on to the end. So what do we want to append? We want to append the current question that was being used. So the current question, if we use that question, then we append it onto used questions. And of course, we want to print that as well. So we want to print that just to check it's working. So print used questions. Used questions. Don't know why I didn't get that S on there. Oh, I'm pasting the wrong thing. Current question, used questions, that's why. Okay, now if the Q count is less than the length of data, then it's going to do this. But if not, that means we've reached the end of the game. So we're going to put an else. So you can see it's the same indentation here. So this is our selection statement, right? So we've got quite a few things going on here. We can go through it before we finish this. Here I'm running the read file function and putting all that information into data. Here we're importing some global variables. Here we're making or declaring two variables, one that creates a random number, another one that gets the current question. Then we're doing a loop, this iteration, and we're saying, it's kind of like saying if the current question is in used questions, then just make another random number and put that random number into current question again. So keep on doing that until this is not true. Both of these are not true. And then after it goes down to here, and if this is true, then do all of this. Otherwise, else, do the following. Now, we haven't set up anything for what happens when we end the game. So for the moment, we'll just say print game over or something like that. Okay, but we haven't, as I say, completely finished it. So we would actually want to maybe have some sort of message box or something come up here, so we can make something that comes up on the screen saying game over, and then you could have a button saying would you like to play again, or that kind of stuff, right? Now, anything else we need to do? I don't think so. So what I'm going to do is run it, just have a go and see if it works. Right, so what I need to do, because I'm testing this, I need to see the shell as well, because we're printing the question number count, and we're also pressing used questions. So if we look at both of these, press start. Okay, so the first thing I can see is that the first questions come up, says number 1. Now the only problem is here under question it says question 0, so we're going to fix that in a second. It should say question 1 instead. But if you don't have this black box and you don't want to display the question number at all, then that's fine. You just don't have to bother with this. But I've got it, so I need to fix that. So the first question was number 4 out of my list of questions. So I've got 5 questions, just remember, and that's the 4th one. So if I've answered now, obviously we're not checking our questions to see if they're correct, so score is not going to do anything at the minute. So 2 types of networks, right? So WAN and LAN. When I press next, okay, so it's showing me another question. This is incrementing, but this should say number 2 instead of 1. And I'm showing a different question, and I can see in used questions. So this, what is this? This is my used questions, right? Because look, that's what I'm printing, used questions. And this is adding each question that's actually been done in there. So remember, this Q count is different from current question. Current question is this number here. Right, current question is that one. Where Q count is just a count of the questions which is being incremented every time. Okay, so you got to just remember those things. Right, so let's move on. So I've done 2 questions and 2 have been added to my list. That's good. Again. Right, so 3, and they're all different, of course. Look, 4, 1, and 3. It hasn't done any of the same ones. And the next one, 4, 1, 3, 5, right? So none of them are the same. And there I have it, number 5. Now, if I press next again, right, it's done game over. Okay, that's good. Now, you would probably want to do this a couple of times, so I'm just going to run it again. Right, so sometimes you don't come across any of the errors the first time. It might not happen the first time, so check it another time, and it looks good. And every time I press next after that. Now, one thing I did notice that happened was that every time I had a question that I answered, so let's say I've got 2 things I need to fix. Here I can see the question number should say 1 instead of 2, or sorry, 0. But also, what does RAM stand for? Random access memory. But look, when I press next, it's still highlighted. See that? So maybe we want to reset that and also do this. Okay, so we'll do that now. That first bit where my Q number is, that's what that is. It's the Q count. Now, Q count starts off being 0 up here, and that's why. So when I do Q count here, it doesn't change to 1 until here. But I want my Q count to be like this because Q count is looking at the length of data. So it needs to be doing it this way. So what I'm going to do is just do here +1 on Q count down here, +1. Right, so we'll just test that before we do anything else. Okay, so it says question 1 now. There you go. And good, looks good now. So I've got the question number fixed. Right, now I want to fix that bit that also did the reset buttons. This reset buttons, we've got it already. So this is a nice and easy thing to do. You can just use this, see the way we're using it here. So I'm just gonna, I've got it in buttons pressed. So I'm just gonna take that one, copy, And where did I put it? Well, I just put it up here somewhere. So I can just put it right under this comment. Right, that's it. Resets buttons, just put that in there. So let's run this again. Right, let's test it one more time. So now this time I can see the question number, and if I say files are organized in directories, press next. Okay, so now it's gone back to black. Now I want to test it again, random access memory. So I'm testing different buttons. Of course, I know that it's going to work. Doesn't matter which one now that I'm picking. When I press next, it's reset it again. Okay, and then now it's at the end of the game anyway. So at the minute it says game over, and that's something we will change later. But in the next video lesson, what we want to do is probably increment this score.